What's up, guys? It's Will Burroughs. I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte with my bachelor's degree in exercise science, and today is a rest day, and we are going to cover rest times. And I do see misinformation being spread around rest times, and specifically we're going to talk about rest times for muscle growth. Muscle growth. And, you know, I've seen people say that short rest times are better for growing muscles. And then, you know, another group says growth. Another group says you have to do a specific time, specific rest time for all muscles. If you rest longer than a certain amount of time, you're going to kill your gains. Then X time kills gains. And I really just want to clear up the misinformation around this. So there's a little bit of housekeeping to do, and we're just going to make it really simple. To understand why rest times are important, we have to understand some fundamentals about building muscle. So there is this thing called Henneman's principle. Henneman's principle. It states that we recruit motor units from smallest motor units to largest motor units. Now, why is this important? Well, as you train closer to failure, so we'll have start and then we'll have failure. The closer you get to failure, the more motor units, the larger and more overall motor units you recruit. Recruitment, right? So since we are recruiting more motor units, it means more total musculature is experiencing tension, right? And this is why we say training close to failure is important, because when you start, you're using your small motor units and less of your overall musculature. So a very small portion of your overall musculature is experiencing tension. So it's not a strong enough stimulus for growth, as well as you're not landing on the force velocity curve. So the magnitude of tension is relatively low, right? So getting into that, so more muscular is experiencing tension is good. Now, when we get closer to failure, we also get on the force velocity curve, which is an inverted relationship, which pretty much just means high force, low velocity, low force, high velocity. So they're opposites of each other. And as you get closer to failure, there is an involuntary decrease in rep speed. Now, why is this important? Well, as we know, when velocity goes down, force goes up. So when we are pushing our hardest and recruiting as many motor units as our body is allowing us to try and complete the task, the decrease in rep speed is going to increase the force or the amount of mechanical tension that our muscles are experiencing. And since we are getting closer to failure and we're recruiting more of our total musculature is experiencing higher levels of mechanical tension, which creates the stimulus that is large enough to stimulate muscle growth, right? So pretty much to recap and sum this up, as you get closer to failure, you recruit more of your motor units and the larger motor units that have more of a capability of growing. Then also, as you get closer to failure, your reps start to involuntarily decrease in speed, which increases the amount of force or mechanical tension experienced by the muscle. And since more of your overall musculature is experiencing high levels of force or tension, you are creating a stimulus of a magnitude that elicits muscle growth, right? So now that we know that, there's something else to keep in mind, and that is that our first set is the most productive of an exercise, or the first set of that muscle group for the workout. Because we have been rested for a few days in between our sessions and our muscles haven't had to work like as hard in that time off, so our first set, we get the highest level of motor unit recruitment. But as sets go on, there's a decrease in motor unit recruitment, and then there's another decrease in motor unit recruitment, and so on and so forth. So as you do more sets for the same muscle or in the same exercise, you decrease the amount of motor unit recruitment, which makes your sets less effective. And through data, we know that in order to double the stimulus from the first set, stimulus from first set, you have to do 5 more sets to failure, or close to failure. Close / to failure, right? So since we know that there is automatically going to be a decrease in motor unit recruitment between sets, we want to create a scenario where we can go into our next set with the highest level of motor recruitment that we can, keeping in mind that it already is going to drop. And this is where rest times plays a very big role. And automatically, we can just go ahead and take short rest times. This will, obviously rest time will vary for the most part, but typically anything that is under 2 minutes is a short rest time. And the reason that short rest times are not good is because it doesn't allow your muscle to adequately recover. And since the muscle is not adequately recovered, there's still some fatigue and all of that mumbo jumbo going on, which means that you are going to have even further decreased motor unit recruitment, right? So we already know there's going to be a little drop. Now you're making it a bigger drop. And we have seen in studies that short rest times actively decrease the amount of muscle growth that you get. Now, back to our list. So we can go ahead and cut that one off. Specific rest times. This doesn't really make any sense. Like, even let's apply it. Like, let's just say, if you do anything, you have to do 2.5 minutes of rest time. And I'll tell you why that doesn't make sense. If you do a set of bicep curls to failure, yeah, it may take you like 2 minutes to recover from that and feel fully ready to go. But if you were to do a set of heavy squats to failure, and you rest for 2.5 minutes, your heart's still racing, your legs are still not feeling ready, and you go and do that next set, guess what? Decrease in motor unit recruitment because you are not recovered. The thing is when it comes to recovery, we want to get as close to baseline as possible, which means our heart rate is back to normal, right? Muscles feel rested and ready to go. And, you could also say this would be a part of muscles rested and ready to go, but metabolites are cleared for the most part. So like that burning sensation in your muscle. Obviously want that to go away before you start your next set. But so the reason the specific rest time doesn't work is because it varies from exercise to exercise. A heavy set of squats, you're working adductors, you're working glutes, you're working quads, you're axially loading your body, which is extremely stressful to the body. You're getting your cardiovascular system involved. Whereas your bicep curls, you're working some forearms, you're working some biceps, you're not really getting your heart racing, and you're not working multiple extremely large muscle groups and pushing them to failure. So we can go ahead and cross that off. Specific rest times don't make sense because different exercises are going to create different demands for recovery. And then we have our last one. You can't rest longer than a certain amount of time. Longer than X amount of time. All right. The main reason that I can say or think of why this would be is that if you rest for a long enough time, your pump decreases or goes away, and also, the metabolites would go down as well. And people would think that people think pump equals growth. And guess what? Newsflash, it doesn't. Pump has absolutely nothing to do with muscle growth. Nothing at all. So, growth is stimulated by mechanical tension, and resting adequately, which means you are as close to baseline as possible, is going to give you the highest level of motor unit recruitment that you can achieve. Obviously, with that decrease that is inevitably going to happen. So, if they say no resting longer than 4 minutes, doesn't matter. Even if you're doing biceps and you rest for 4 minutes, even though your biceps were completely recovered at minute 2, that's not going to damage your stimulus. And also within the studies where they showed that short time rest times didn't affect hypertrophy, they also showed that resting longer even after the muscle was recovered, it had no impact on hypertrophy. None. None negative nor positive, which just means that as long as you're adequately rested, even if you rested an extra minute, it's not going to hurt your hypertrophy and it's not going to hurt your gains. So you could rest a little bit longer just to be safe, or if you're really in tune and when you're ready to go, then you can just go ahead and hop back into it. And some days your recovery demands may be shorter or longer than others. Like some days my biceps, they're good to go. 2 minutes, they're recovered. And then other days, sometimes I need 3 minutes, right? And it just happens. There's so many variables that can control that. So the ultimate takeaway that you should get from this video is that the only advice for rest times that you should take is rest until you are recovered and ready for the next set. Which means heart rate back to normal and muscles feel recovered and ready to go. Recovered and ready to work. Oops. Ready to work. Also, I apologize for my horrible handwriting, but I'm trying to write it at least quick enough so that you don't sit here forever watching me write. Okay, so that's it. Rest until you are recovered and ready for the next set, which just means heart rate back to normal and muscles feel recovered and ready to work. That's it. That is the only rest advice you should ever take in the context of hypertrophy or muscle growth. Period. Period. If somebody says rest short times for muscle growth, they don't know what they're talking about. If somebody says rest a specific amount of time, like, and I'm saying specific as in like, it has to be 2.5 minutes all the time. Obviously there are ranges, like for the most part, like a heavy set of squats, we know for the most part, for most people, 3 to 5 minutes is the range where you'll probably feel recovered. And something like a bicep curl is, for the most part, most people are gonna feel recovered around 2 minutes, maybe 2 to 3, right? But if they tell you you have to rest a specific time, not a range, for all muscles, they don't know what they are talking about, at least in the context of rest and recovery, but that is not a great sign for the rest of the information that they are divulging. And the last thing, if they tell you to rest, or if they say resting longer than X time kills your gains, kills gains, same thing. They don't understand rest or how the muscle building mechanism works. So again, not a great sign on their part. But again, this is all you'll ever need. Rest. Get back to baseline so you can have the highest level of motor unit recruitment to produce the most amount of effective stimulating reps that you can get from each set that you do. And this will be a big help in overall getting gains, because if you're doing the 30-second rest times, like, you are absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. Like, absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. You know, if you're resting a specific time and like that specific time was like 4 minutes, you probably have been resting long enough and over resting for some muscles, which may make you take longer in the gym. But if your specific rest time was like a minute, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And then same thing with like resting longer than X amount of time. If you rest longer than a minute and a half, you're shooting yourself in the foot. If they said not to rest longer than a minute and a half, and you follow that, then you are shooting yourself in the foot. So it's going to be different for every exercise, and depending on how many muscle groups you're working and how large those muscle groups are and how involved your cardiovascular system gets. So there is going to be a range of rest times, but typically anything under 2 minutes is typically too short. So like, you could argue that a minute and 45 would be fine. Obviously that just depends on you and when your body feels recovered, but for the most part, like, being very safe and conservative, like you could say 2 minutes. If you recover pretty quickly, then a minute and a half, maybe anything under a minute and a half would be too short. And those muscles that would recover in a minute and a half or a minute and 45 seconds would be something like your biceps, muscles that are very small that you are not, that are working with relatively lighter loads or not being moved in a compound movement. It's more of isolation work. And then those bigger muscles and the bigger compound movements are going to take longer to recover. Anyway, I hope that this clears this up for you. I know that there's a bunch of misinformation out there about fitness, and it can really get in the way of your progress, and it can make it really disheartening because, you know, there are people that you look up to for, and that you look to for advice, and you're getting fed BS, and you know, you're like, this person's jacked. They've given, you know, maybe they've given you some good information that worked before, and then you're like, oh, I'm not really making progress doing this. But you believe what the person's saying, and they're telling you wrong information, and then you kind of get discouraged because you're not really making that much progress, or it's completely plateaued. And that can just really suck. So this will be tentatively the rest advice that you need. If the science ever changes, I will make a video and I will update this and I will update my information. But from what we've seen, in terms of building muscle, it is purely just a matter of resting until you are close to baseline to increase motor unit recruitment, to increase the overall amount of your musculature that can experience mechanical tension from the working set to stimulate growth. And the more motor units you are able to recruit, the larger amount of mechanical tension your muscles are going to be able to experience, therefore increasing the magnitude of the stimulus for growth. So you will grow more. Yes. Anyway, if you learned something new and you enjoyed this video, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Lets me know that y'all are enjoying this and learning new things, and that's kind of the whole purpose of this channel, as well as documenting my own journey while giving you knowledge along the way. But yeah, that covers this video, and I'll see you in the next one with another rest day. So we're gonna break down another topic. See you then.